Hi, welcome to Skip's Corner, where I cover Nashville's baseball history and events and introduce you to players, coaches, and other fans. A few months ago, I attended the Jerry Malloy Conference in Birmingham, Alabama. It is a conference for the Society for American Baseball Research dedicated to Negro Leagues baseball history, its players, its owners, the leagues itself. And I had a guest ride down with me who I've grown to love, and she came back with me a couple of days later just to carpool together, and I heard stories about her father for a little over 3 hours going down and a little over 3 hours coming back. Her name is Dr. Harriet Kimbro-Hamilton. Her father is former Negro League star who was born in Nashville, Henry Kimbro. She's from Nashville. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She received her BS degree in health and physical education from Fisk University in 1975 and her MS degree in sports administration from Florida State University in 1976. And then in 2003, she received her doctorate in sport and recreation management from Temple University. And prior to her retirement as a college professor at Tennessee State University, Dr. Kimbro-Hamilton taught at Alabama A&M University, Stillman College, Bethune-Cookman College, and she was a Metro Davidson County school teacher. And at Fisk University, she was a former athletic director and coach. She was a champion for Title IX also, especially at Bethune-Cookman, and then forward into other school opportunities. She's received numerous awards and recognitions for her work in women's sport from the Women's Sports Foundation and the National Association of Girls and Women in Sport. In 2012, she was inducted into the Temple University Women's Entrepreneurial Hall of Fame. And in 2017, she was inducted into Fisk University Sports Hall of Fame. In 2015, she published her first book called Daddy's Scrapbook, Henry Kimbro of the Negro Baseball League, A Daughter's Perspective. And that book received the Robert Peterson Recognition Award at the 19th Annual Jerry Malloy Negro League Conference in 2016. This award is given annually for bodies of work that increase public awareness about the Negro Baseball Leagues. She's married to Mr. Herbert Hamilton, and they have a son, Patrick. And I found her a joy and a delight not only during our visits in Birmingham, but also in our conversation that you're going to hear now. And I hope you'll enjoy it. She has a lot to say, and she's very serious. But when she puts everything in perspective of her dad and her family, it all works. And it's a great story to tell, and it's an even better story to hear. Here's Dr. Harriet Kimbro-Hamilton, my friend, Little Kimbro. But I want to talk to you about your dad and you and your family. Those are the things that are important subjects, I think. Let me just say a few things about your dad. Henry Kimbro was born in Nashville in 1912. He passed away in 1999 at the age of 87, and he was buried in Greenwood Cemetery in Nashville. Now, that's a long time span, 87 years, and it'd be hard for us to cover it. But how did you find out about your dad being a Negro Leagues, let's don't even say, being a baseball player, a professional baseball player? How'd you find out about your dad?
My father was the owner of Bill's Cab Company, and he also had a gas station on Charlotte. And I always used to go down, or I would go with him sometimes down to the station and just hang out. And one day, Butch McCord came to visit my father, which several of the players would often stop by, and other people he knew, just to visit and chew the fat, as they would say. And he saw me, and he introduced himself. And he said, "Did you know your father was a hell of a," and I'm using his term, "Did you know your father was a hell of a baseball player, a professional baseball player?" I said, "Who are you talking about?" And he said, "Yeah, your father played professional baseball." Really? And then I went to him immediately and said, "Butch said that you played professional baseball." And his response was, "Oh, I played a little bit." That was it. So I knew I had to find, because I was always a curious kid. You could not just say something, and if I wanted to know more, I'm going to find out. I said, clearly, this is two different interpretation, Butch's interpretation, and my father's interpretation of just kind of brushing it under the rug. Oh, I played a little bit. And I know there's more to this than meets the eye. So that's how I found out.
But you didn't stop there.
No, I had to go on. I think I was in high school, I believe I was in high school. And I of course, I knew I was always a geek anyway. Books were my best friends. And so I just started the process of researching and looking and finding books about the Negro Leagues, which, first of all, I didn't really know a lot about, and begin to look for his name. And his name kept coming up and kept coming up. And I thought, wait a minute, well, he's just not the average Joe Blow here. He had a lot of good things were being said about his playing ability. Not about him personally, but about him as a player. He was respected, and 6 or 7 all-star games, that's not regular Joe Blow stuff. So I began to find out. And then, of course, when he passed and I saw that scrapbook, my mother gave me that scrapbook. Oh my gosh. I'm like, what in the world? And there was a lot of questions after that scrapbook, and that I wished now I had the time I sat down and talked with my father about a lot of things about baseball. And I did sit down and talk with him about key things. What did you think about Satchel Paige? What about Jackie Robinson? Key things, but not the deep stuff. And I had more questions after he passed than I had the time I had with him and sitting down and talking.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a few statistics. I've spent a little time trying to review from various sources, and I don't think people know how good he was. And I think you said 6 or 7 all-star games. I found 6. I think 6 of them were East-West all-star games, which were the premier all-star games.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1947, he had a great season with the Baltimore Elite Giants. He won the batting title with a 385 batting average. He had the best slugging percentage at .619. He led the league in doubles with 24, with total bases 153, 52 RBI, and 37 extra base hits. Now, that's an all-star season right there. That's maybe an MVP season right there. Mm-hmm. He led the league in plate appearances 4 times, base on balls 2 times. So he had an eye for the strike zone, on base percentage 2 times, and at-bats 2 times. There's a difference between at-bats and plate appearances. Would include walks and everything else. At-bats would not include walks. But he was often overlooked on defense. And I found this interesting. He led the league in putouts as a center fielder, not once, not twice, 4 times in his major league career. And assists from center field, he led the league twice. Now, that's pretty good. So he made some plays back into the infield as an assist. And he is one of 2. At one time, he was one of 2 who had hit a home run over the roof of Briggs Stadium in Detroit. And you talk about that in your book also. I'll talk a little bit more about your book. You mentioned Scrapbook, but when you found the Scrapbook, you took it from there. And what did you do with that information?
Well, first I sat down and looked through there, and I felt like I was transported back in time. It was fabulous. I've never felt that way about time, and really feeling like I was just standing there watching all of this happen around me. Some great stuff was in there. A Satchel Paige was a little note there. I think he had a lot of respect for Satchel Paige. And I think there are some stories that I never got to about when Satchel was here in Nashville.
Right.
That he knew Satchel. They didn't hang out because my father didn't have hangout friends. But I think he respected Satchel a lot. And if he respected Satchel, I know Satchel respected him. Right. But from there, I took leads on the different Black newspapers that were recorded in there and try to research the articles of the games, look for the statistics, and then find out where his favorite places were. I know he didn't care to be at New York Black Yankees, because Fred Tex Burnett was trying to did make him cleanup man.
Right.
And he stated, I'm not a cleanup man. I'm a leadoff man. And he also wanted Daddy to, as he said, snatch one over the left field and home runs. And he felt like Daddy was under, his talents weren't used in that respect. So he could be a home run hitter because he batted left-handed. Now he's a right-hand person, but he batted left-handed, which that still perplexed me. How did that happen? So I began to look and get my leads for my book. And I took it from the scrapbook. As he progressed, my research progressed all the way to the end when he finished up with the Birmingham Black Barons. So that's what I did. I used the scrapbook as a lead to research him and his background and where he went and what he did and his stats. Most of the stats I got from that scrapbook because he kept all of the articles. That was another thing that perplexed me. I thought, I've never seen Dad keep all of this. And it wasn't my mother because my mother wasn't even in the picture in most of half of the scrapbook. So this had to be my dad. Right. So it was fascinating to see how he organized his career and how it progressed and the statistics that he kept and the articles that talked about him being hot at bat. One article said he was hot at bat. And he also had an article there about him being on the New York Black Yankee team. I found that fascinating because he talked like he didn't care for it. But I think he learned some things that he could, as he said, snatch the ball, which meant hit a home run. Yeah. So I think he learned a lot about himself, but he didn't stay there long. They brought him back the year after, and he spent more time as a Baltimore Elite Giant than anybody else, or the Elite Giant Corporation. I mean, organization starting from Nashville.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Tom Wilson, who started that, you and I both have called him the father of Negro Leagues baseball in Nashville. And had it not been for Tom Wilson, the history of the story would have changed. And I don't know I'm kind of perplexed by what Tom Wilson was thinking when he let your dad go to New York. I think there were a lot of players involved, but somebody knew that he wasn't happy and they brought him back and put him back in that leadoff position. He said, I'm back where I belong, according to your book, which is a delightful book. I've congratulated you before, and I've heard so many people talk about it. Daddy's Scrapbook you published in 2015, and it's a great story. Now, the story, though, continues not only with your dad, but with your family. Tell me about how important your family was. I know, but I want you to tell who may be listening how important family was.
Well, my father was, of course, the matriarch. I mean, he was the lead person in our family, and we were his second group of kids. He already had a daughter, my stepsister, Geraldine Kimbro, that lives in Baltimore. And recently, my big brother, my oldest brother, Larry, passed, and he was next. And then when he married my mother, who was Cuban, had 3 more kids, and we were the last set of group of kids. And so it started, it's intertwined, everything is locked in together as you progress forward. So I could not tell his story without telling our story, because I was just his daughter looking at him. So I had to give that perspective, as I call the book, A Daughter's Perspective. I wasn't looking at him as me being an expert in baseball. I couldn't do that because I wasn't. I couldn't tell the story from the point of just I'm witnessing and telling and sharing about his career, because I couldn't do that. To me, it was all together. A little girl growing up and then seeing Daddy as something else different, and just looking back and seeing, well, what kind of life he had? What kind of baseball player was he? Answering those questions, but also giving people a look at my daddy from my perspective, because, of course, a lot has been written about him that were negative. I'm not denying it. I tell people, I'm the first to tell you, I'm pretty sure you are right because I knew my father. But he was my father, and he was a great father to all of us. And he was marvelous. And so the bad man that you painted off the field as hot-tempered, hard to coach, somebody said he was hard to coach, all those things I didn't see.
Right.
I saw a man that was very strict, a hard-nosed disciplinarian, and he also held himself to that standard.
Right.
And so I can see people being ticked off about him having high standards for everybody around him. We grew up like that.
Right.
So in some instances, people may have taken that or taken him the wrong way. And a man that only had a 6th grade education also, and saw a lot of negative things in terms of growing up. He was born in 1912. So he was in the thick of cruel discrimination in this country. And everybody, they're molded different ways. I'm pretty sure, and I don't think I'm wrong in this, that had a lot to do with molding of my father. Growing up in the South, cruel discrimination, not having a father dying early, lack of education, seeing lack of opportunities, mistreatment. And he just had a temper. And so I think that fueled it for him to just say, look, this is how things are going to be. And this is how I'm going forward in life. And this is the way I am. And it molded him to be a person that demanded more of people around him. He didn't have gray areas. There was no excuse. There was no, trying to talk your way out of, there was none of that. It was either or. That's it.
Yeah.
So I wrote the book to describe what I grew up with, what I saw, and maybe give some basis, some explanation of why he had a temper, why was he hard-nosed, why was he a loner, and why he didn't take too much off of people and especially people that played around him. He gave everything he had. He taught us to do that. And so he was not going to let you off the hook. So I read several people say, boy, if you mess up, man, Kimbro, you going to have it, Kimbro going to have it in for you. I understand that. Because of that, because of his background. So that's why I wrote the book, so that if someone was interested in finding out more about him, knowing him, you could see it through my eyes. You could see my father through my eyes and maybe understand who he was.
Well, I think you've done a very good job of that. At least I've read it twice. I went back and looked for more notes that I had written in the pages. And when you talk about how he grew up, preach it, sister, because I'm going to tell you, it had a definite impact in my mind. And I'm seeing that change a little bit. I know your dad was invited back to some events that Major League Baseball put on, and I'm wondering how you felt about that. But I'm also wondering, are the Negro League players getting their due in your mind? You've done it through your book, and let me back up and say that I mentioned that trip to Birmingham. We were going down for the Jerry Malloy Society for American Baseball Research conference on Negro League baseball, which was a wonderful event for a few days there. It highlighted the Negro Leagues. That's all it was about. So is there enough being done to highlight Negro Leagues baseball and especially their players?
I don't think so. I think there need to be more written. Everybody knows the stars. Okay. If you say Josh Gibson, if you say, I had an opportunity to talk with his great grandson recently, and I was thrilled about that. But everybody knows the big guys. Buck O'Neil was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, which is great. But there are so many others. There are so many stories out there. I think for people to understand America during that time and how rough it was for African Americans, they can also go through the Negro Leagues and see. My father's just one story. I mean, but what a story. So how many others are out there? So I encourage other family members to write about your uncle or your father or somebody. There's so many other stories that can reflect what and teach what America was during that time to African Americans. Now, the Negro League players in themselves, I have a major problem with Major League Baseball. I know what they did, and I applaud them for that at this point in time. But they can do more. They can do more. And I think that they are going to try to do more. But I think, number one, there need to be more Negro League players in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying my father deserves to be there. I don't know. Because, if I could go back and research all of those that are in there now and do a comparison of statistics, I think we'll see the story, and a story will unfold that there are people in there that other people have more, particularly Black players have more statistics. But Butch McCord said something that was very profound. He told me, he said, when Jackie Robinson broke in to the league, he said, everybody thought that the door was wide open. He said it wasn't. There was another gate or another hurdle. And then after that hurdle, there was another hurdle. And then after that hurdle, there was another hurdle. So there were things in place to protect Major League Baseball from the influx of Black players. They were ready to bring in some, but they were not going to bring in all. And so I have a problem with them just cracking the door open and, here you come through and then shut the door. I have a problem with that. And I think that speaks to their state of mind and that baseball is not there yet. There's still hurdles. And so I think more players belong in the Hall of Fame, and it looks like they want to shut the road down. It's what I'm getting. It's like, okay, we've let these guys in, so that's that. But you don't know the whole story. And with the statistics, I'm glad that they have done that, because now it will show more. And hopefully in the future, more African-American players will get into the Hall of Fame.
I know that the Nashville Sounds have been very important to you because of their support of your book, not just the Daddy's Scrapbook, but your other book about Negro League stars. And you were the person that pushed to have Nashville Negro League stars recognized out at E.S. Rose Park, where Belmont University plays baseball, with a plaque, which is just wonderful. And it gives a lot of history about Turkey Stearns and Butch McCord and all those others. The Nashville Sounds have an initiative called 9, and I think it's pushed by Major League Baseball through the minor leagues, and not all minor league teams picked it up, but the Nashville Sounds have. And what did the Nashville Sounds do for you with your books?
Well, when I published my second book was just for the other Negro League players, because now everybody knew who my father was. And of course, that voice inside, probably my mother, saying, now you shine the light on your dad. Now, what about the others? Because they were very dear to me. And I used to go out and interview them at their home and sit down and talk, and they were just so wonderful to me. And of course, they never knew my first name. They all called me Little Kimbro, and that I had to identify myself as Little Kimbro, but they were all very, very dear to me. And I think that is one of the reasons why I wrote the second book, for them, so that they can be highlighted, who they were. People may know Kimbro, but they may know Butch McCord. I'm trying to think of anybody, Jim Zapp. But beyond that, they don't know the others. Of course, they know Turkey Stearns and Junior Gillett. And again, those are the top people, but they don't know Petway. Right. Who was Petway? And he happened to be, from what I have read from the articles of old, he was a superstar in terms of a catcher. He was probably one of the premier catchers of his time. He could throw a man out on second base without even standing up. Now, to me, I think that because I played the catcher because I was the girl and they didn't want me out there trying to, they didn't think I could catch and I could catch better than all of them. But anyway, so, to be on your knees and throw somebody out, second or whatever base, that's a talent. And so I don't think he will ever get his due, but he's in the book. He's highlighted. I highlighted him because he was a candidate for the Hall of Fame in 2000, along with my dad. And I think they just, let people send names and that's how he got on the list. I don't know, but he was on the list, which is good.
Right.
And so Mr. Petway and some of the others, Dan Black, nobody knows who he is, Abernathy. These are the guys that I met. And even Coach Martin, that used to be the basketball coach at Tennessee State University. And my husband played baseball for Tennessee State. He saw him pitch, with the team.
Right.
And he said, woof, he could throw that ball.
Yeah.
And I thought, how many people know that this man, he played for the Philadelphia Stars, was an outstanding Negro League baseball player for a year, but he had the talent. He had the goods. And so I found that fascinating. And that's another story.
Right.
That's another story that need to be told. So all these guys have stories that need to be told because they just didn't go and play. They were playing against the best.
Right.
And everybody wanted to go and play. So they were the elite ones. And they need to be known, especially for Nashville. I think I challenge everyone from a major city to find out who were the Negro League players from their city. I think the story would be told more and more Negro League players would get their due, locally, regionally, and maybe even nationally. So I feel that the story has to be told, and those guys need to be recognized as the best of the best during that time because they were nowhere. Half of America didn't even know they existed.
And too often that I think, in my opinion, that we come to a name such as Jim Gillum and then we just stop. We want to listen to him, and we've heard those stories. I mean, those stories can be found anywhere, but there's not a story. You highlighted Bruce Petway. I think Bruce Petway was probably instrumental in getting Turkey Stearns to go to Detroit because he was very comfortable in Nashville. And all of a sudden, Bruce Petway knew him. Petway played in the Negro Leagues, the pre-Negro Leagues, I guess, before 1920, and was a star then. So I think he had some influence. So there's another connection I think we're missing out on. But the Sounds donated your second book about the Negro League stars in Nashville, donated it to schools, didn't they?
Yes, they donated it to every middle school and every high school library, which is wonderful because that wasn't there before. Imagine just one kid. There might be several, but imagine one kid that wants to know more about the Negro Leagues. There's nothing there.
Right.
There's nothing there. And now there will be at least one book there. I think several of the libraries have more than one book. I think they have the book, We Are the Ship, and they may have some others, but nothing that talks about or reflect Nashville and the Negro Leagues from Nashville. And where did they go? And where did they play? And where did they travel? And I thought that was so important. It's a basic book. It wasn't, I didn't do a whole lot with it. I just wanted to highlight them, highlight a story about my son meeting these great people at the 1993 All-Star game, which he met so many. And that just blew his mind at 9 years old. And my father was there. And I wanted to highlight what was done at Belmont, so that they can physically go to a couple of places and see this, touch it, read it, and see this history for themselves here in Nashville.
Your dad is in the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame, rightfully so. Maybe should be in the Cooperstown at the Baseball Hall of Fame. I think as we go along, you're going to see his name come up more often and hopefully get the due that he deserves. This is not a commercial for the Nashville Stars, but the initiative by John Lora and others to bring Major League Baseball to Nashville they've chosen a team named the Nashville Stars, which has its history, I think, in 1950 and 51. That was actually a team in the Negro Southern League. And there was a bus. You interviewed Shannon Jones, who was the bus driver, and you shared that audio, which is just terrific. That ground roots initiative has never been done before. And I'm hoping that it is accomplished in the form of a Major League Baseball team actually named after a Negro Leagues baseball. How can that help? How important is it to have minority ownership of a Major League Baseball team, which has never happened?
I think it's very important because it sends a signal that something else has been accomplished. It's a historical marker for Negro League Baseball to have someone of color because, of course, we had Negro League owners. A lot of them have not been given their due because they are not looked upon as doing anything, anything special. But they did do something special. These were Black men that owned and had their own baseball team, which was quite an accomplishment in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and leading on up into the 60s. We had that team flourished here. If it wasn't for Tom Wilson, again, the father of Black baseball here in Nashville, but he went on to do other things on a national level. He was president of the Negro National League for 10 years. And so that is an accomplishment within itself. And of course, I've nominated him for the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame. Rightly so. He belongs there. And he belongs in the Hall of Fame, in the Baseball Hall of Fame, because here's someone that was an owner starting in the 1920s. Here's a businessman. Here is an entrepreneur. Here is a promoter. This man promoted the East-West All-Star game. And, we could go on and on to the things that he helped initiate in baseball. And so I think it's important that if they can do that, the Nashville Stars will be another historical marker for people to reflect on the Negro Leagues and how it has led to that. Historically, how did the Negro Leagues lead us to having a Black owner of a Major League Baseball team? I think that would be very significant in reflecting on the history of Negro League. I think it's very, very important. Something that I think will eventually happen. I think it will eventually happen because it's time. It's time for that to happen. I know Magic Johnson, he's not a majority owner of the LA Dodgers. But if this goes through, then he will be the first. Mr. Stewart will be the first African-American owner of a Major League Baseball team, which would be a huge historical marker in this country, putting baseball in the light that it belongs, being a little bit more diverse, right, which they've had a problem with for a long time. So this would kind of open another door, I think, that needs to be open. Here's another hurdle that needs to be jumped.
Well, Dave Stewart seems to be the guy that's pushing that initiative, rightfully so. I think he's an imposing figure to see. I think he probably still has a pretty good fastball and was an imposing figure on the field as a pitcher. But he is likable. He seems to be the guy that's going to be the face of the franchise, and I think that's terrific. Eddie George has also gotten involved with that, and that's my opinion. I'm kind of a little off base here because I get excited thinking about Major League Baseball coming to Nashville, and then the Nashville Stars being owned by a minority, diversified ownership. I think adds to the. It's putting sugar in the coffee. I mean, it's just great. Yes. I think it's just adds all kinds of things. I'd be surprised if Major League Baseball couldn't jump on board with that. And I think teach other teams how this is done to give the attention that's due. I've always been perplexed why Tom Wilson is not in even the Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame. And I know through your efforts, I think we're going to see that come about too. Let me get back to one other thing I wanted to cover because you mentioned your dad played baseball in Cuba, and undoubtedly that's where he met your mother.
Yes.
Okay. Now, and we talked about family a little bit, but I'm always interested. You and I are people of faith. We've shared our faith a couple of times. You quote Bible passages in Daddy's scrapbook. So undoubtedly, faith was an important aspect of your family. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Well, my mother, of course, was Catholic. And when we were growing up, we would go to the Catholic Church. And as we got older, I'm United Methodist now. And we started going to the United Methodist Church. My mom started going to the United Methodist Church, which was on the other street from our house, because she had to go downtown. And I think the problem was we had Catholic churches around us, but I'm not sure if she was able to go and bring her African-American children. I think that might have been an issue. I'm sorry I never talked to her about that, but we always had to go downtown to that Catholic church. And so that became a hassle, I think, with two little bad children.
Or at least one.
Well, unfortunately, true. My brother was the one. Okay. I backed down when I saw her get upset. I'm like, okay, I'm going to behave. Then she started going to an African-American church, which was on the other street. And of course, they welcomed her with open arms and they loved her. And so I saw God work through my mother, how she was open to everybody, loved everybody. Of course, she came from Cuba, and Cuban people, you didn't see all that racism that you saw here in America. And every summer we would go to Cuba and spend the summer. So I saw another world of people being true to their faith, being God-driven people where they loved everybody, which is what the Bible tells you to do, because God loves you. That faith was important to us. And of course, my father, who worked 7 days a week, just about, or 10 days a week, I always say whatever the other days were, he would be working. But he encouraged us, and he was a man of faith. He had his concepts of doing things his way, but he believed in God, and he knew there was a God, because how he came through life. Right. So many times he said things could have gone haywire or wrong, but he knew that his journey was the journey that God laid out for him. The opportunities and the way things unfolded would just didn't just happen. So we grew up with both parents being of faith, and I saw more of my mother and how she lived a Christian life. And of course, that influenced me. But on the other hand, I understood my father because of all the children, and I think my brothers and sisters will tell you, I'm more like my father than my mother, because I had a temper growing up, and I had to learn how to live with the temper and the frustration. I have a very low point of tolerance when it comes to people. My father was like that. I'm a whole lot better than my father because my mother taught me. And when it came to a point where I would react to things like my dad, it was my mother that told my father, she learned how to react through you. So you will need to sit down and show her and talk to her how she should handle things from now on. And he did. I was in the 7th grade. I'd just been sent home for fighting in school because the boy pulled my pigtail. And my daddy told me, don't take no mess off of nobody. Don't take no mess off of nobody. And so I didn't. And he sat down and said, you know what? You're a smart girl. And if you could figure out how to outthink people, I think you can do that. I think you're so smart that you can outthink most people. And he challenged me. Instead of using my fist, use my brain. Mm-hmm. And I said, I will take that challenge. And I didn't get in any more trouble in school, which principals calling the house almost every time you turn around because something was going down. And for a girl, that wasn't acceptable. And my father's like, I don't want you to be a street woman now, just out there fighting everybody and just clowning and cussing and all those other things. And he had to learn to curtail some of the things that he did. But because there was faith in the household, And we went to church and we participated in church. And my mother was very kind to people. And I had front row seats to that. She was a very kind person. And I saw kindness from my father, believe it or not. That heart was in there. And she called it a golden heart. And I saw it once I recognized, you get through the layers. Once you get through the layers, you see that. And I was very, very fortunate to have that influence. And so I had to get through my layers. And of course, my husband can testify to that too. And my friends, that there are layers, and they'll tell you not deep down, she is a good person. But I understand my father better than anybody else because I understand myself. And now I understand where he came from, and things, hard times can make people hard.
Yep.
And that is it. That is the explanation in a nutshell about some people. And so I was educated. My mother educated me in several ways: how to be a lady, how to talk to people. Because I used to talk to people like my father. I emulated my father. I remember one time we were downtown and we were 4 or 5 years old. And of course, my mother had us by the hand. And this white lady came down and she looked at my mother because my mother looked white. She looked at my mother and she said, "What is this? What is this? What?" And my mother she didn't say anything. She just, come on. I think I snapped my hand from my mother and I put it on my hips and I turned around and told the lady, "None of your business."
Of course.
My mother's like, "Shh, shh, shh, stop. Come on. Because, that could have led to a situation. Exactly. I didn't know at the time, but I'm emulating my father because I saw my father. Nobody came around us when my father was with us, about questions about my mother, questions about us. Oh, no, they all ran away. And I thought, well, that's the way to handle it. Okay, that is the way to do it. And I had to unlearn that. And I remember my mother being, she would not retaliate. Well, my father would. So I saw too. And my mother was the way. And it took more strength. And as I grew older, I figured it out. It took more strength and more faith to do what my mother did than my father. It was very easy to do what my dad did, bark and, and get ready to retaliate. But I saw God through my mother, and I grew up that way.
Yeah. Your dad's feistiness served him well on the ball field too, didn't it? And I have no doubt you could hit a fastball right now. I have no doubt that you have that in you, just like your dad. You mentioned in your book that you were influenced not only by your family, and I think that's a great story that, we should be proud of our families, or at least to find the good parts of our families. And I think you've done that through your book and through our discussions and what I know about you and what I've heard about you. You talked about living legends like Jim Zapp, Butch McCord, Sue Bridgeforth, and Sidney Bunch being influenced on you too. I'm grateful that you would join me. I'm grateful that you would spend your time with me. I could listen to these stories all day long. I'd get in the car and drive to Birmingham with you for no event just to turn around and come back, because we did that before. And we had fun. Time. It was fun. But I want to stress one thing. People can buy your book, Daddy's Scrapbook, and the name of your other book.
Home Plate, Henry Kimbrough and the Other Negro Leaguers of Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, so those can be purchased, I think.
Amazon.com.
Amazon, some of the other places. But I want to close this because I think this is so important. It's the last 2 sentences in your book. Above all, this journey has allowed me to honor my parents and their blessed life together. What a testament. And you close by saying, to God be the glory that I was able to make this journey with Daddy's Scrapbook, guiding me along the way. Journey and guiding. And I think that says a lot, because I know you and I know what you've become, what you've done with your life. And I applaud you for that. Harriet, thank you for spending time with me. And we're going to do this again somewhere down the road.
Oh, please. I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
Be looking out for a documentary. Okay. I am putting together now. I've got my script already. And in fact, we're going to video this Friday and Saturday to start We're going to go through 3 places in Nashville. That's the landmark. We're going to have the Nashville Sounds, a tour of what they've done with the Negro League history.
Right.
And it will reflect the book Home Plate for people to see. I will be sharing that in the near future. So be looking out for that.
Boy, you're a champion. I'm going to tell you for your dad's history in Negro Leagues baseball. I think that's great. Congratulations on that. And we'll look forward to seeing that down the road. Harriet, thank you. I hope you have a great day, and I'm grateful that you spend time.
Thank you.